What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Heroes Reforged Reads a Comic Book. We're going to get right into it. Today we're talking about another Invincible Universe tie-in comic that is called Capes, Volume 1, Punching the Clock.
Oh, Capes!
And in Invincible Volume 6, Invincible leaves the planet and goes and sees his father,
It's insane.
Nolan Grayson, Omni-Man, on another planet. And then when he comes back, this is where, in the Invincible timeline, this comic book Capes takes place. And we'll get into that because it's revealed towards the end of the comic book. But this is Capes. Robert Kirkman, again, writing. The art is by Mark Englert. And just a little background information on this comic book. This is something that Robert Kirkman had intended to do at the same time as Invincible for kind of as long as he could keep it going. To flesh out the world, to discuss events that were happening in both books, to kind of be a shared superhero universe. And then plans change, and that didn't work out. And the comic book got canceled, but then he brought it back in a backup feature in later issues of Invincible to kind of wrap up some stuff that he set up in the first 3 issues. And then after the 3rd issue, the book was done. So he was able to pay off some stuff. So overall, my thoughts are, I give it 3 stars out of 5. I liked it, didn't love it. I like some characters, didn't love some characters. I like some names. The Chronodial is pretty tough to beat. It's an awesome name. It's an awesome name for a character.
I actually think I remember seeing a creature like that from like an ancient Egyptian book that I used to love back in the day. I used to be obsessed with ancient Egypt, like mythology stuff.
Yeah.
Love to
so
see
that was pretty good. Adam, what did you think?
I have to agree with Hector. You know, it wasn't. If you had Cold Stone and it was like it, love it, gotta have it. It was a like it for me. Definitely was not a gotta have it, but. Even though that may be the case, and it probably was towards the lower part of all of the spin-offs, if I were to rank them, I still enjoy and appreciate a little more insight into this world and seeing, because we saw the Guardians of the Globe and we saw how that propelled the whole first, I guess, 6th of that story of Invincible. And I always appreciate having a little bit more insight into the world and meeting new characters and seeing how the rest of the world operates, because to me, it just helps flesh out and build out the world a little bit more. But, didn't love it. Still thought it was a fun read.
Yeah. Augustine.
I feel like every series needs a Thor 2 The Dark World, and I feel like this comic book was it.
Son of a bitch. Nicely done. Nicely done.
I feel like this is the book where I'm just like, not that I regret reading it, but I didn't really like any of the characters, didn't necessarily like the Capes Incorporated situation. There were moments that did keep me reading, like, seeing the fights was really cool and seeing some of the character dynamics that were built. But by the end of this, I didn't really care about Bolt or his family.
Right.
I didn't really care about the Meteor Twins, even though they did something really cool. Chronodial was okay.
That name slaps, though.
That is a good, silly superhero name. Yeah. But as we talk about it, I can go into the things that I did and didn't like.
Sure.
Is there anything that sticks out for you guys that you really enjoyed?
There's a ton of references to characters like Batman and Blade and all these other Marvel and DC superheroes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I was a little bit more like sucked into that stuff, and I kept flipping the page of like, oh, who else are we referencing? Who else? Anytime it kind of went into the story, I have to agree. I liked the characters, but I wasn't definitely not as invested as I've been in like Brit and some of the other things that we read. For sure, not as invested as I am in Invincible. So that was a little bit of the bummer part. I really wanted to every time we read any of these spinoffs, I want to be sold and I want to just really feel for these characters. And even when this character makes references like, Black Superhero has some sort of lightning in their thing. It's like Black Lightning, Static Shock. And I'm like, okay, I would have hoped this would have like hit a little bit better, but so I think I like that stuff more than the actual story. The story was pretty okay.
And the fun thing about that stuff is it kind of breaks the universe a little bit because it's like, it makes you question, well, wait a minute, are those superheroes real superheroes or fictional?
Are they TV, movie, like real?
Well, if Blade exists, does Superman exist? So does that cancel out Omni-Man? Like, what is going on?
Right. I think I'm leaning towards that stuff being like fictional characters within their universe. And I can definitively say we're going to get some answers on some of that stuff coming up soon, but in the Invincible series. But I want to talk about something that Augustine said, that you didn't care about Bolt. and he's kind of the main character. And I agree
Right.
with you 100%. I feel like out of all of the, if there's a bunch of balls in this comic book that were dropped, maybe
Yep.
that's the biggest ball that was dropped.
Yeah.
Whereas other stuff, I'm like, I don't care too much if that ball was dropped.
Yeah.
Or, or if those plates are still spinning, hey, good job. You were able to keep those plates spinning the whole comic. That's cool. But this feels like a major one. Bolt is this main character who has a certain set of powers. He has a family. Some similar stuff that we've seen with other Robert Kirkman superhero stories, but it feels like he is not going into it as much with Bolt and what his motivations are and what his philosophy is and who this guy is for us to really root for him. He feels very, very bland, very normal protagonist. Some of the other characters I think that I was more interested in were, I liked the Kid Thor backstory and the knockout revelation that she wears fake breasts.
Yeah.
I thought was really, here's why I liked it. Because I started reading the comic book and I went, boy, oh boy, are they drawing her bazungas huge. Come on. You know what I mean? It felt very much like a 90s comic book. It felt
Not just her clairvoyance too.
Yeah.
Okay,
Every
clairvoyant's
woman,
a whole
yeah.
separate issue. We're going to talk
That's a
about clairvoyant in a
whole-
second. We're going to talk
yeah.
about clairvoyant in a second because that's another
That's a
major
spicy
ball that I
meatball.
think I think they dropped. I think that plate is no longer spinning and fell on the ground and cracked in a million
It's
pieces,
shattered, yeah.
and you cannot pick it up. But with Knockout, I thought that her and Kid Thor had an interesting burgeoning relationship, the beginnings
I
of a
agree.
relationship. The fact that happened in the comic where she revealed, oh, I put them in to like help my publicity.
Yeah.
And I
Too
thought that was
real.
I thought it was too real. I thought it was really smart and clever, and I wanted the story to go into that more. And eventually, and Kid Thor was written in a way, it was very smartly, where he was like, oh, I don't care about that. I
Yeah.
just had to ask because you looked a certain way, and then you came to dinner and you look a different way.
Yeah.
I think it's fine. And then they're in a relationship, and then at one point, Kid Thor is like, I really wish you wouldn't. We'd have to stop wearing those, because it just, I think it sets up the world as being kind of misogynistic. And it's also a reflection of our real world. And as unfortunate as it is, it kind of makes sense that a up and coming superhero would like do that and then shoot to popularity. And that sucks, but that is a reality. And I that's one element of the book that I really, really liked. So I like those two characters. Captain Capitalism sucks.
I hate Captain Capitalism, dude.
But he is a dick
him.
he is a dick in the comic book, and in the comic book,
Yeah.
again, it's a recurring theme that Robert Kirkman writes these old guys getting with young hot women, right? It's like the
It's
third.
funny to me
It's like,
that character looks like a mix of Omni-Man and J. Jonah Jameson.
I
Yeah.
totally thought it was Omni-Man at first, and then in some frames I thought he was J. Jonah.
we've gotten. I mean, even Omni-Man technically, because he's thousands of years old or whatever, but he gets with Debbie Grayson, so that
Right.
kind of counts. But like,
Yeah.
we've had Brit as an example of this. We have now in the Invincible series, Immortal is dating Duplicate, and now we have Captain Capitalism, and all of these three older men go through these changes where they're like, now they're better men because they were dating these younger women, and that's what happens towards the end of this book with Captain Capitalism and this like
Don't forget
immortal.
Super Patriot too.
Yeah, you're. That's 4. That's a theme. Next time I talk to Robert Kirkman, I'm gonna
Yo,
bring
you
it up.
gotta
I'm
talk
gonna be like,
to your homie
What's up
Robert
with
Kirkman.
these old men trying to get their whistles wet?
what are you into, dude? What are you
trying to
into?
say, bro? What are you trying to say?
It's interesting. It's all I'm gonna
Can I
say is
see your
it's
website,
interesting.
please?
And at least, can I see your web search history, bro? What's going on? But at least it feels like the purpose of those storylines is to be like, let me show you a closed-minded man.
Yeah.
And then let me
Right.
show him softening
Some
up and
growth.
actually, and some growth. So,
Yeah.
still Captain Capitalism is a dickhead. But
yeah.
all the other
he's an asshole.
side characters and characters in the back are okay and kind of interesting. I did appreciate how the boss of Capes Incorporated was the bad guy. It's very Buddy from Incredibles.
Xavier knockoff.
Homeboy,
Yes, big brain.
You flip the page and you see him, and I'm like, well, that's a bad guy for sure.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
And
Big
I
brain.
just love Chronodial. That's basically all I have to say about this comic book.
I mean, just to piggyback off of what you said about the characters, I think the biggest thing for me that was like the bummer, even though it has those great moments, and like I definitely flipped when I was flipping through and reading, I'm like, this is entertaining and I'm enjoying
Yes.
this, and there's some
Yeah.
fun stuff being brought up. It just lacked the depth. I would have really loved
Right.
for it to
Right.
maybe have a little bit less characters and a little bit more focus on who they are and what they stand for and what they believe in. I think that to me is the biggest difference about this and Invincible. With Invincible, your hooks are in deep.
Yes.
And you really
Yes,
understand the world, you understand the characters, what they stand for, who they are, what they believe in.
Yeah.
They really feel like three-dimensional characters. And with this, it just wasn't there. So it's also kind of a bummer to hear that the book was pretty much immediately canceled. But at least we still have it in some existence. We can kind of reference it and read it and see like, well, yeah, I can understand possibly why.
And now when we read something in Invincible where Cecil Stedman is like, I even had to call in those capes idiots. You go like,
now I'm just
now,
like, yeah.
actually, yeah, they're kind of idiots. Like that
I
actually
don't like them either.
That kind of checks out. That kind of checks out. Yeah. What were you going to say, Augustine?
I feel like this book it felt amateur to me. And I hate to say it about Robert Kirkman, but the writing was subpar. The art was definitely subpar. And you could really tell what he was into, specifically the one moment where you see the I guess the PR manager, the person who's trying to advise them on how to make things better. Do you guys recognize that character that was in like the skull cap and the yellow suit with all the jewelry? That was Sacha Baron Cohen's character, Ali G.
yeah.
Ali G.
Ali G.
Yeah,
So you can
yeah.
tell that Robert Kirkman was watching a lot of Ali G and the Ali G show, because I fucking love that show,
I literally
dude.
flipped the page and I was like, what is Ali G doing
Yes.
in this comic book?
Yeah.
The original Ali G show is brilliant. He interviews
Yes.
Donald Trump. He goes and he interviews like all these senators, and like it's crazy. But it made me feel like I was in Robert Kirkman's shoes when he was real young, and very impressionable. And I can't say that I wouldn't have written like this as well, because you're a younger guy, you think a certain way, and your life is a certain way to you. And
Ali
that
G
was
is great. Ali G is
Ali
great.
G's amazing. I mean, I love that cameo, but I can
Yeah.
tell where his mental state kind of
For
was, because I was in that mental state too back when I was
Bro.
when I first saw Ali G.
Let's talk about Clairvoyant for a second. Clairvoyant
Okay, yeah, exactly.
is a superhero character who I don't even know what her powers are. Dude.
I don't know if she has powers.
She
She has powers.
see the future or something. But basically, she is scantily clad and she's hooking up with dudes
All the time.
And
She's
she has
in
a
a very
husband.
open relationship, it seems like.
She has a husband or boyfriend who's like a-okay with it. In fact, partakes in the voyeuristic.
Scoochie over. Make some room for me.
He just watches.
Potentially. And
Dude
I
just
felt
watches.
like when we met this character in the beginning of the book, I'm like, okay, how's this going to pay off? And then it never did, really. The guy just died,
It's
and then she
bad.
immediately hooked up with another dude right after her, like,
Captain
long time
Cosmic. Yeah,
boyfriend
She was
died. She hooked
immediately
up-
just boning Captain Cosmic.
And so it's another thing where when we have ideas in, like, Brit, where Robert Kirkman's like, here is a stripper who's going to get with our main character. At first, it's like cringy. At first, it's like, okay, is this just going to be sexism? Is this going to be sexist? What are we doing? But then he gets into a little bit more, and you're like, okay, you're trying to subvert the expectations. I get it. That never happened with Clairvoyant. I think that was a big swing and a miss.
Yeah.
Maybe my least favorite character in the book, which is a real bummer. And echoing with what Augustine is saying, I think it's interesting that Robert Kirkman was saying in the back of the book that this whole idea started as a wrestling comic book, where these were like wrestlers. That was the personas. And then eventually it turned into a superhero comic book. And then it turned into almost like I want to say like Heroes for Hire, or almost like Damage Control type of a comic book, where it's like, here's in the big city, a bunch of characters you don't normally spend time with, and they're doing it for money, and they're clocking in and clocking out, and all of that stuff I liked. The jokes or the covers where there's a bad guy fighting and some guy's like, hey, I'm on my 10-minute break. I will help you. Like those ideas I think are actually really, really interesting and funny
I
and
agree.
clever. And I think that some of those maybe got away a little bit in the creation of this book. I think that the art by Mark Englert works for this book, and it is very, I wouldn't say amateur, but I totally understand what you're saying. It's fast. It's quick and dirty. It's, this is an up-and-coming comic book artist who Robert Kirkman found and was like, would you like to collaborate with me on this thing? So it feels like it's rough around the edges and cool, raw, kind of like a, Ninja Turtle or indie comic booky feel. But I think that what you guys are saying, to sum up, it's a book that's a little rough around the edges. I enjoyed being here while I'm here. It's okay that this is the only volume of Cape so far, but Augustine, to bring it back to the brilliant thing you said, Thor: The Dark World. If these characters or concepts ever get revisited later, like with say, Avengers Endgame of the Invincible universe, and they make it awesome, I'm all for it.
Absolutely.
I'm all for it.
I think there's tremendous potential with Kid Thor, with
Yeah.
Knockout, even with Bolt, you know, like having him completely like either give up the lifestyle or completely get into it and he becomes a great character. I think the potential is there. I just think it was executed poorly in this book. I did have fun with, you know, all the characters. Robert Kirkman, or I'm sorry, who's the artist again?
Mark Englert.
Mark Englert didn't spare a chance to throw in a Spider-Man analog anywhere. The Spider-Man on a little cruiser thingy. There was Spider-Man shooting a bazooka. You could see Spider-Man's legs running in certain areas. And I thought that was great. And that's the kind of stuff that kept me reading. Just the overall silliness of it and not being super invested in it as much as I was, or as I am in Invincible. I was just like, okay, cool. This is a fun side story. I appreciate seeing all these characters that I have seen before in the main Invincible storyline. So overall, I'm glad I read it, but I don't know if I want to revisit Capes any longer in the future. I don't know if I'm going to be into it the next one if we do another one.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think to Hector's point, I think, there's totally an opportunity for these characters to get Avengers Endgamed and to show up and you're like, I'm in. Yeah. We got these characters. We got this crazy battle, the story, Then I'm totally in for it. But yeah, this is definitely not something where I'm like, oh man, I can't wait to read the next 15 volumes of Capes. Like that's not going to be a thing, you know? Which is kind of a bummer though, because I feel like everything else that I've read in this universe so far, I've really, really enjoyed. So the fact that this is kind of at the bottom of my totem pole, I'm like bummed about. I'm not happy that, you know, we spent, 90 minutes reading a book and coming out of it being like, well, it's okay. But again, I like just a little bit of the expansion, a little bit of the world building, even though I wasn't necessarily sold in the characters. It's nice to know that while Invincible is on otherworld missions, there is stuff still happening on Earth. Like it's still, time moves forward and things move forward. So it's nice to see that progression and to see sort of like the ramifications of what happens when he is gone. Whether or not, it ties directly into the Invincible story in a major way, it's still just fun to be able to like have that.
Yeah, I agree.
Before we announce the next book, I'm going to go grab it off my shelf because I want to pitch something to you guys. I want to pitch something to you guys because I think that this might be the next move we might have to make. And you guys will have to correct me if I'm wrong. Hang on one sec.
Okay.
I got to grab it off my shelf. I got to grab it. I got to grab the book. Okay. I believe.
Better be a Debbie comic book spinoff.
I'm so interested now.
I believe that the next Invincible comic book is so earth-shaking that we're not ready for it yet. I don't want to move too far ahead while we're still living in this, pre-Volume 7 Invincible world.
I'm nervous.
So I figured, why don't we just take another bit of a breather and next week reread another Invincible Universe tie-in that we haven't gotten to yet, but we have already sort of surpassed in the timeline. So let's just rewind a little bit. Let's talk Tech Jacket, Volume 1. Let's do that before we go back into the Invincible Universe, and in which point we will be fully caught up. This is the only one we're sort of behind on so far. Tech Jacket, Volume 1, The Boy from Earth, the events of which have already taken place and have already been referenced in the main Invincible comic book. So let's just fill in a brain. We're going to read Tech Jacket next week. And then the week after, we're back in Invincible, baby. Spoiler. Don't look at the cover. Don't look at the cover. Don't do that. Okay. Tech Jacket, Volume 1.
Yeah.
The Boy from Earth.
Just don't look at these images because it'll all get spoiled for you. But yeah, I actually already have that one, so I'm ready.
Okay.
I'll read it right now. I'll read it right now if you want me to.
I'll read it tonight.
I swear to God.
I'll read it tonight. I'll read it to you right now.
Well, folks, that is Heroes Reforged Reads a Comic Book. Join us on Discord. Get in there and talk about the comic books with us. It's super fun. We're talking Invincible and everything else that everybody else is reading. Be sure to check out our Patreon, where we're offering a bunch of rad, cool things, including, if you weren't already aware, uncut reactions to WandaVision. We're going to watch the entire show. So do that as well. So go get Tech Jacket, Volume 1, The Boy from Earth.
Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already if this is your first time here, and go check out the Not Circumcised reactions.
Good. Thank you so much.
Baby.
Bye.
Bye.